The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Wren found him. She was returning from the Hollis farm, her healer bag heavy with empty vials and her boots soaked through, when she heard the sound beneath the old oak roots. It was not quite a whimper and not quite a cry. Something caught between the two, small and desperate and utterly alone in the storm. Wren knelt in the mud without thinking twice, because that was who she was, the girl who could not walk past a wounded thing, no matter how the village warned her against it. What she found beneath the roots was a wolf cub, silver-furred and shaking, its eyes clouded white and unseeing, a long scar cutting across its face from brow to jaw, as if something ancient had tried to erase it from the world. "You poor creature," she whispered, gathering it into her cloak against the thunder. "Whoever did this to you will answer for it, even if it is only to me." The village of Hollow Creek sat at the very edge of the Moon Kingdom, close enough to the border forests that its people had learned to fear anything with fur and fangs, and far enough from the capital that no one there cared what happened to a healer's daughter, who kept forbidden company. Wren had grown used to being looked through rather than looked at. The woman who mended broken bones and fevered children, but never received an invitation to sit at anyone's table. She told herself it did not matter. She had her herbs, her small cottage, and now, apparently, a blind wolf cub who would not stop pressing his small body into the curve of her palm, as though her hand alone kept the world from ending. She named him nothing at first, unwilling to claim something that plainly belonged to the forest and not to her. But weeks passed, and he learned to walk beside her by the sound of her footsteps, turning his blind face toward her voice like a flower toward light. Somewhere in that quiet ritual, without meaning to, she gave him a name. Ashki, she called him, an old word from her grandmother's tongue that meant the one who listens. He would tilt his scarred head at the sound and press closer. And Wren, who had spent her whole life being unnecessary to everyone around her, found that she had become necessary to something after all. If you are enjoying this story so far, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because there is so much more of Wren and Ashki's story still to come. It was on a morning thick with frost that the riders came. Wren heard the horns before she saw them. 3 long notes that sent the village into a scramble of shuttered windows and locked doors, because horns like that had not sounded in Hollow Creek since the fall of the royal house 12 years before. She stepped outside anyway. Ashki pressed against her leg, his hackles raised though he could not see what approached. The riders wore the silver and violet of the Moon Kingdom's royal guard, and at their head rode a woman with a face like carved winter, her eyes sweeping the muddy street with the patience of someone who had done this search 100 times before and expected to be disappointed 100 and... "We are searching for a creature," the woman announced, her voice carrying easily over the silence. A wolf marked by a scar across its face, blind since birth or since the curse that made it so. "Anyone harboring such a creature is required by royal decree to surrender it immediately." Wren felt her blood turn to ice, her hand instinctively falling to rest on Ashki's head. She thought of lying, of shutting her door and pretending the guards had never come, but 12 pairs of eyes were already turning toward her cottage, toward the wolf who never left her side, and she understood with sick clarity that hiding was no longer an option. "He is mine," she said, stepping forward before she could stop herself. "I found him wounded in the forest 3 months ago, and I will not hand him over to be caged or killed." The guard captain, Commander Isolde, dismounted and crossed the muddy street with unhurried steps. She knelt before Ashki, who bared his teeth but did not lunge, and something in her stern face cracked open like ice under sudden sun. "By the old moon," she breathed, "it is truly him. Your Highness, we have searched 12 years for you." The words hung in the frozen air like something too heavy to be believed. Isolde spoke quickly now, of the lost Prince Corin, heir to the moon throne, cursed the night his family was betrayed and slaughtered, hidden by a dying nursemaid's final spell in the body of a wolf cub, so no one hunting the royal bloodline would think to search the forests for a blind, unseeing child. He was meant to break the curse when he found someone whose care was given freely, without want of reward, Isolde said, looking at Wren with wonder. "It seems he found her 3 months ago, and none of us knew to look here." Wren wanted to laugh, wanted to weep, wanted to gather Ashki. "No, Corin, impossible, unbearable Corin. into her arms and refused to let the guards take him anywhere at all. Instead, she stood frozen in the mud, while her entire understanding of the last 3 months rearranged itself around a truth too large to hold. The wolf who slept curled against her hearth, who learned the shape of her world through sound and scent and trust, was the lost heir of a kingdom that had spent 12 years believing him dead. And now, standing in her doorway with frost on his silver fur, and his blind eyes turned toward her voice as if she were the only fixed point left in a spinning world, he was about to be taken from the only home he had ever truly known. Commander Isolde explained that the curse could only be fully broken within the palace, before the sacred hearth where the royal bloodline had been anointed for 1,000 years. Ashki needed to go, but when Isolde reached to lift the trembling cub, he twisted away and pressed himself so hard against Ren's legs that no amount of coaxing would separate him without violence neither woman was willing to commit. It seems, Isolde said finally, that the healer will need to accompany us to the capital, at least until His Highness is settled. The journey to the capital took 11 days. The Moon Palace rose from its mountain like something carved rather than built, silver towers catching light even on overcast days, and the court that filled its halls watched her arrival with the particular cruelty reserved for outsiders who had stumbled into rooms they were never meant to enter. She heard the whispers before she had even dismounted her horse. The healer girl, the border peasant. What could she possibly know of raising princes? She kept her chin level and her hands steady, because Ashki needed her steady, and because she refused to let a room full of silk and sneers convince her that 3 months of devotion counted for nothing. The breaking of the curse took place that same evening before the sacred hearth, a fire that had burned, they told her, since the founding of the kingdom and had never once gone cold. Ren stood at the edge of the circle with her heart hammering as the court healers and the aging high priestess worked their old magic around Ashki's small silver body, chanting words in a language Ren did not know but somehow felt in her chest like a second heartbeat. Ashki whimpered, then howled, then went utterly silent, and for one terrible moment Ren was certain something had gone irrevocably wrong. Then the fur began to recede. The small body began to stretch and lengthen, and where a blind wolf cub had lain shivering on the stones, a young man now knelt instead, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, his eyes still clouded white and sightless, but unmistakably, achingly human. What do you think happens now that Prince Corin has his human form back? Leave your predictions in the comments below, because this story is only just beginning. Corin could not see, not with his eyes, but the moment the transformation settled into his bones, he turned his face unerringly toward Ren, exactly as Ashki always had, and reached for her hand as though 12 years of forgetting had never once dimmed the instinct to find her. "You are still here," he said, his voice rough with disuse, cracking on the words like something long unpracticed. "I could feel you the whole time, even when I could not remember why your voice mattered more than any other sound in the world. I knew it did." Ren's throat closed around an answer she could not find, and she simply held his hand, kneeling beside him on the ancient stones while a court of strangers watched a peasant healer become, in the span of one transformation, the single person the lost prince trusted above all others. The days that followed were a strange education for them both. Corin's sight did not return with his human shape, a cruelty the curse had apparently reserved for spite, and so he relearned his own palace the way he had relearned the forest, through sound and memory, and the steady presence of the woman who refused to leave his side, even when the court made it painfully clear she was not welcome to stay. Lady Ashwin, the regent who had governed the kingdom in the prince's presumed absence, received the news of his return with a composure so perfect it bordered on unsettling. "How resourceful of you," Ashwin said one evening, finding Ren alone in the physic garden gathering herbs out of old habit. "A border healer, elevated to royal confidant in a matter of weeks. One almost admires the ambition, even as one wonders whether the prince understands what he owes his rescue to instinct rather than affection." Ren refused to let the words plant roots, though she felt them try. She had only ever wanted to keep a wounded creature alive, and if that creature turned out to be a prince, she would not apologize for the tenderness she had given freely and without calculation. Still, doubt crept in during the quiet hours. When she watched Corin move through rooms full of nobles who spoke his language of politics and pedigree, a language she feared she would never learn quickly enough to belong beside him. It was Corin himself who found her doubt and refused to let it stand unchallenged. They keep telling me I should be grateful to the guard who found me, or the healers who broke the curse, or the mother I barely remember who hid me in fur to save my life, he said one night, sitting beside her on the garden wall, while autumn wind moved through the physic garden's dying herbs. But none of them sat with me through the nights I could not stop shaking. None of them learned to say my name in a way that made the fear quiet down. You did that with no crown to gain and no court to impress. If that is not the truest kind of loyalty a person can offer, I do not know what is. Ren felt something crack open in her chest, old and guarded and long unused to being addressed so directly. And for the first time since the horns had sounded in Hollow Creek, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she was not simply useful to him, but wanted. The bond between them deepened in ways neither of them announced aloud, built from small moments rather than grand declarations. The way Corin's hand found hers without needing to search. The way Ren began describing the color of every sunset so vividly, he claimed he could nearly see it. The way both of them, healer and prince, had spent their lives being underestimated by people who mistook quiet competence for weakness. But the ancient laws of the Moon Kingdom demanded more than affection before a healer's daughter could stand beside a prince. And Lady Ashwin, watching the growing closeness with narrowing patience, began to move pieces on a board Ren had not even realized was in play. The regent's opposition surfaced formally at the autumn court. Gathering of the kingdom's noble houses convened to discuss the prince's restoration to the throne. Ashwin rose before the assembled lords with the same perfect composure she wore like armor, and reminded the court gently, regretfully, that ancient covenant law required any consort of royal blood to prove lineage worthy of the crown, a requirement a border healer of unknown parentage could almost certainly never satisfy. I say this not from cruelty, Ashwin told the murmuring lords, but from love of this kingdom and its laws. Ren stood at the back of the hall, humiliation climbing hot into her throat, and felt 12 years of village silence rush back into her bones as every noble eye turned to assess and dismiss her in a single sweeping glance. She might have fled the hall entirely if Corin had not risen from his seat, sightless eyes fixed toward the sound of Ashwin's voice, his own voice cutting through the murmurs with a steadiness that silenced the room. Then let the covenant be examined properly, he said, because I do not believe Lady Ashwin has told this court the whole truth of Ren's lineage. And I do not believe she has told it because she does not yet know it herself. It was the palace archivist, an elderly man named Talwyn, who had spent 40 years cataloging dusty genealogies no one else cared to read, who finally uncovered the truth Corin had only suspected. Ren's grandmother, the very woman whose old words had given the wolf cub his first name, had not been simply a healer from the border villages. She had been descended from the founding line of moon priestesses, the women who first bound the royal family's magic to the sacred hearth 1,000 years before, a lineage so thoroughly scattered by war that no record had connected it to a border cottage until Talwyn matched faded names across 3 archives. Your grandmother's line predates the royal house itself, Talwyn told Ren. By the oldest reading of the covenant, you do not merely qualify to stand beside the prince. You very nearly outrank him. The revelation should have felt like triumph, and in some quiet corner of herself it did. But Ren found she cared far less about outranking anyone than about the disbelief and something almost like relief that crossed Corin's face when Talwyn's findings were read aloud before the full court. Lady Ashwin received the news with the same unshakable grace she had worn throughout the entire proceeding. Though Ren caught just once the smallest flicker of something raw beneath the regent's composure, gone before anyone else could notice it. If you want to see how Ren and Corin's story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because the final ceremony is coming. What followed was not the swift punishment Ren had half expected, but something quieter and more honest. Ashwin requested a private audience with the prince. and Corin emerged from it saying only that the regent had governed a broken kingdom for 12 years, with no guarantee her prince still lived, and that a woman who ruled that long out of duty deserved to leave her post with dignity rather than disgrace. Ashwin stepped down from the regency at the following new moon, delivering a final address that spoke with unexpected warmth of her hope that the kingdom's new queen would govern with the same quiet strength she herself had shown. She retired to a manor in the eastern hills, and though Ren never forgot the humiliation of that autumn hall, she found she could not hate a woman who, in the end, chose grace over grievance. The formal claiming ceremony was held beneath the same sacred hearth where Ashki had become Corin, on a night the priestess declared auspicious beyond any in living memory. Ren stood before the fire in robes the color of moonlight, her grandmother's old wooden pendant resting warm against her collarbone, and watched Corin move toward her with the same unerring certainty he had always shown in finding her, sight or no sight. The court that had once looked through her now watched in silence heavy with reverence, and when Corin took her hands before the ancient flame and spoke the old binding words, Ren understood at last that she had never truly been invisible. She had simply been waiting for a room that knew how to see her. "I could not see your face the day I first understood I loved you," Corin told her, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "But I have never needed my eyes to know you were the truest thing I had ever found. You saved a creature with no name and no worth in anyone's eyes but your own. And in doing so, you saved the only version of me that was left. Whatever crown this kingdom places upon my head, I want it known before every lord and every hearthfire that it means nothing without you standing beside it." Ren felt tears she did not try to hide slip down her face as the priestess pronounced the binding complete. As the sacred fire flared silver and gold in a display the oldest priest swore had not been witnessed in 3 generations, as the court that had once dismissed her rose as one body to bow before the healer who had become, through nothing but devotion freely given, the future queen of the Moon Kingdom. Years later, when children in Hollow Creek asked their grandmothers about the healer's daughter who had married a prince, the story they heard was a simple one. The kind mothers told their daughters on stormy nights when the wind rattled the shutters. It was the story of a girl who could not walk past a wounded creature, who gave her care without asking what it might cost her, and who discovered, in the end, that belonging was never something a person waited to be given. It was something built, one small act of tenderness at a time, until an entire kingdom had no choice but to see her. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it with someone who loves epic romances as much as you do. Let me know in the comments, and subscribe to the channel, turning on the notification bell to receive more moving stories.